Live.
I did. Hello. Welcome to Buzzing with Cousin Talk. I'm your host, Cousin Johnny. How's everybody doing out there? We got a great show here planned. And before we start, I'd like to shout out to all these great nonprofit organizations we have here in Monterey. These people are champions. They're doing a lot for the community. So if you can, donate or maybe volunteer. Donate to your favorite organization today. Okay, here we go. All you golf buffs, Peninsula golf buffs that have played in the old Del Monte, do you know that that's the oldest golf course west of the Mississippi River? It's one of the oldest golf courses in the United States. And I want to introduce our guest. This gentleman is he's a historian, an author, a lecturer, a preservationist. So let me please welcome Neal Hotelling.
Hi, Cousin Johnny.
Neal,
how are you doing?
Great. Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure.
This is gonna be great. We're looking forward to it. So Neal, what brought you to the Monterey Peninsula?
Well, actually, my wife used to live there. We got married in Michigan, and when we got married in 1984, we said within 9 months within 5 years we were going to move to California, and within 9 months we did. So
Yeah,
I'm a native Michiganian, so okay. I was happy to get out of the cold weather.
What year was that, Neal?
I was 85.
Okay. And then I did some little research on you there, a little detective research. And you worked for the Pebble Beach Company as a operations manager.
Yeah, I went to work at Pebble Beach Company in 1991 as the golf operations manager. And as somebody who loved history, and I'd picked up a little bit of history in my first 5 years here on the peninsula before I went to Pebble Beach. And when I got to Pebble Beach, I thought, this is as good as it gets. Great history, great golf course, great company.
Yeah.
I asked who the first golf professional was, and nobody knew.
No,
nobody knew. We got to fix that.
Are you a golf fanatic yourself, or mostly?
I'm not. I enjoy playing. I am not competitive. It's a great experience to be out on the golf courses.
So you just and you thought maybe I'm going to do some research for these people here.
Well, I love history. I've always been passionate about history, and especially knowing the local history of where I live. So when I moved to Monterey, I got very familiar with the Monterey history as quick as I could. But I also had enough smarts to get my degree in business management rather than golf. So I became a business executive, but still passionate about history.
Well, my hat's off to you and a lot of the historians that are here in Monterey. There's a few, and they're really good. And I'd like to thank you and them for what you guys do.
There's so much history there that it's hard to keep track of all the history because there's so much.
Yeah. Well, my dad was a sardine fisherman, so I'm always this. In fact, Tim Thomas, he's
sure. I know Tim.
He knows fishing, and every time he's been on the show a couple times, and every time I see him, I'll just shout out. I'll be in my car and I'll shout out, "Hey Tim, who was the skipper of the Numeradimo?" or something, and he'll immediately know exactly who it was, and he'll yell back, "It was whoever, Ferrani or whoever."
Yeah, but he knows them.
But a lot of these, a lot of people in town that, the go-to place to play golf is usually, around local good people. They go to Del Monte. So I thought it'd be good to give some people some history of the old Del Monte, Neil. So when did it happen?
Well, when the Hotel Del Monte opened in 1880, golf wasn't played anywhere in America. So golf was not even thought of as an amenity for the resort. But within a dozen years, golf started becoming popular. So it was a question of, okay, we've got to put a golf course in. Where are we going to put it? And in 1897, they opened a 9-hole course near the hotel. But on land they didn't own. They actually leased the land from David Jacks, who owned the land where the golf course was built.
And that was the hotel was in that area.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, you got to remember back then there was no highway that went through.
Oh yeah,
and you could walk right from the hotel grounds to the golf course without any trouble at all. And that original 9 holes was actually closer to the hotel than the golf course is today, because the roads have changed and there's a couple of hotels where we used to have some golf holes.
Speaking of the old Del Monte, that was one of the most premier hotels in California.
Yeah, they called it the Queen of American watering holes. It was where anybody and everybody came.
Between that and the La Playa Hotel, I mean that's what you call 2 classics, yep. Right there. So, who designed the course, Neil? I mean,
well, the course has had a lot of hands on it over the years, but the original course was designed by Charlie Maud. Charlie was a British golfer who lived in Southern California, and he had actually built a course down in Riverside in 1891. And he came up to Del Monte to play polo because he was a polo enthusiast as well. And we had a great polo plant up here at Del Monte. So he came up here to play polo. And when it came time to build a golf course, the company tapped Charlie to build the golf course for him. So Charlie jumped in and built the original 9-hole course. There's some dispute, but I think he certainly had a hand in the expansion to 18 holes, which happened in 1903. There's a hotel right where Munros and what's the angling street that goes down there? Kind of across from Don Davy Park. There's a street that angles off.
Oh yeah.
And right there is where Charlie Maud built a house when he moved up to the Monterey area. So he moved up from Southern California. He was an orchard grower down there at Orange Grove, but he came up to Del Monte because he loved it up here. But he actually was the first president of the Southern California Golf Association. So he took golf very seriously.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. So educate me a little bit now. So it's not an official PGA course unless it's 18 holes, right? So is that...
Well, life has changed for golf over the years, and golf courses weren't all 18-hole golf courses originally. In fact, the first golf course in Northern California was the Burlingame Country Club, and it was just a 3-holer. So, as far as an official PGA course, there is no official PGA course unless it's one of the TPC courses that are owned by the PGA. But generally speaking, today a championship course is 18 holes, and most courses are. And Del Monte, like I say, started out as a 9-holer, but by 1903 it was an 18-hole golf course and started hosting championships. It actually had a few championships when it was just a 9-holer.
Okay, and you've done how many championships have they had there approximately over the 100?
Hundreds. And it all depends on how you count. They would have multiple tournaments every year, and you figure the course is 123 years old now, so almost 124. So it's been around and it's seen a lot of competitions. Most of them regional. The early days, there was no California Golf Association. So at the turn of the century, there were three big golf organizations on the West Coast: the Southern California Golf Association, the Northern California Golf Association, and the Pacific Northwest Golf Association. And they were all operational by 1900. And they decided they needed a regional championship. So they created the Pacific Coast Golf Association in 1901.
Okay.
And the first Pacific Coast Golf Association championship was played at Del Monte in 1901.
Now, they've had women championships there too, haven't they?
From the very beginning. When they started doing the championships, they usually had a men's amateur division, a women's amateur division, and a professional open. So some of the amateurs, the good amateurs, could play against the professionals, but the professionals weren't allowed to play in the amateur championships. So,
wow.
And there were some good ones. Willie Smith, who was the 1899 United States Golf Association championship, he won the U.S. championship and came out west because his brothers were out here. And he played at Del Monte and won one of the open tournaments at Del Monte. So,
now, Old Del Monte is part of the Pebble Beach.
Always has been, yeah. And a lot of people forgot that. And the amazing thing is that up until World War II, Del Monte and Pebble Beach had the same green fee, and Del Monte saw much more play.
Yeah.
Everything changed after World War II, but Del Monte was the more popular and more famous golf course until after World War II.
Now, when was Del Monte ever considered to be part of the Crosby at any time, or?
No, the Crosby was always played on the peninsula courses. When Bing brought the tournament up here in 1947,
yeah,
he was a member at Cypress Point. So the idea was to play it at Pebble Beach, but he said, "Why don't we use all three courses?" And the PGA Tour said, "No, we can't do that.
You can't do that."
And he says, "Why not?" Because we've never done it. He says, "Well, you've never had three great courses this close together. It'll work." So they agreed to try it in 1947, and it worked. So they've been playing it that way ever since. They've had a few glitches over the years, like this year they only used two courses, but generally it's been a three-course format since 1947. The courses have changed.
Is that now it's the AT&T? Is that the only tournament where they use more than one course, or there's others?
Well, the Bing Crosby was the first, and then Bob Hope imitated him down in the desert, and he had a multiple course tournament. And the tournaments, when they use Torrey Pines, Torrey has two courses, and they usually will have some competitions on both. And then of late, the USGA, the last two US amateurs played at Pebble Beach. They've actually used Pebble Beach and Spyglass Hill for the qualifying rounds. In the US amateur, they have a large field that plays stroke play, and then the top 64 golfers go into match play. So they would have usually, in most US amateur situations, it's a one-course tournament and everybody plays the course. But because they're using two courses, they can open up the field a little bit more for Pebble Beach and have half the field play Spyglass one day and half Pebble Beach on the other, flip them, and then decide after 36 holes who makes the cut to go to match play. And then all the matches were on Pebble Beach, but they used both courses for qualifying, both in the 99 US Amateur and the 2018 US Amateur.
What now, Bing Crosby, where was the tournament before it came here, and how did he switch it? He just decided to switch, or?
Well, he had two passions in the sports world. One was golf and the other was horse racing. And he had his race horses at the Del Mar course down in the Rancho Santa Fe area. So when he decided to start a golf tournament back in 1937, there was a golf course at Rancho Santa Fe. So he just invited all his buddies down there, and they started the golf tournament at Rancho Santa Fe. And that was just a one-course tournament. And it was down there up until January of 42 was the last time they played it down there. And because Pearl Harbor hit in December, they went ahead and played it in January, but they stopped the golf course play after that. So there was no tournament at all during the war. And then, believe it or not, it was the sardine industry that led to the golf course up here getting the tournament. The Chamber of Commerce was struggling with business. During the war, the cannery operations were doing great guns and the economy was doing well for the peninsula. But the year after the war ended, all of a sudden the fish almost disappeared.
Yeah.
The catch went way down and the economy of the peninsula was sinking fast. So the chamber got together and said, you know, what can we do to bring some revenue up here? And they were contemplating all kinds of things. And Ted DeRyan, who was the sports editor for the Herald then, Ted said, well, why don't we write a letter to Bing Crosby and see if he wants to bring his tournament up here and start it up again now that the war's over. So Ted gets the credit for that. There were a lot of people that made it happen, but Ted wrote the letter and Bing said yes.
Wow. The rest
yeah. There were a few complications. The first one being 3 courses. The second one being that Bing wanted the amateurs to play all the way through, and the tour wasn't really happy with that idea either. And he says, well, I'm paying all the bills and I want to play. So we'll make it work. And it did. So that continued. The second challenge that really happened before the tournament came was that Bing had agreed to a $5,000 purse. And then the tour kind of announced that starting in 1947, we're going to have a $10,000 minimum purse. And Bing was putting up all the money. And the committee that was putting this whole tour together thought this isn't going to work. Bing's not going to come up with another $5,000. But he did. And he paid all the expenses. And talk about your charities. Bing actually wanted all of the proceeds from the ticket sales and program sales to go to charity. And his favorite charity was the Sister Kenny Foundation. And he had a child that had some physical problems, and the Sister Kenny Foundation helped with that. So he designated that the charity that first year would be the Sister Kenny Foundation. The tournament did so well that the charity was up that he split the charity dollars, and only half of it went to the Sister Kenny Foundation, and the half went to establishing a youth center in Carmel.
Right.
That grew into the Boys and Girls Club. And
yeah, they've really donated quite a bit of money over the years.
Yeah, well over $100 million in the 75 years the tournament's been here.
And then AT&T is just following along what they did.
Yeah, it's grown, but the purses have grown a lot too. So.
It's still a fun tournament, but when it was the Crosby, it was nuts. It was fun, because I bartended there every year, like for maybe like 6-7 years, just to make a little extra money and just go see a little bit of golf. And when I was working, they encouraged you to have a good time. It's like they wanted you to party along with everybody there. You're just like, it's a little stiffer now, but in that era, it was just have a good time. Don't worry about it. Have a drink, relax. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. I got an old Crosby poster here in my house. Yeah. And Now, Bing, he was a pretty good golfer, didn't he? Got a hole in one or something?
Oh, he's had holes in one. He's actually played in the British Amateur. So yes, he was a very good single digit player. He knew how to play the game, and he loved it. And he literally was playing a golf course in Spain and came off 18 holes and collapsed. That's how he died. So he died happy.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. That's a
Yep.
good one. Yeah. Now, Neal, you've written what, 3 books?
Oh, 3, 4, depends on how you count.
Yeah. Can you give us a little like quick rundown of each one, or would you mind?
Sure. The first one, literally, I told you when I went to work at Pebble Beach as a golf operations manager, one of the reasons I wanted the history was, as the operations manager, marketing was part of my responsibility. And marketing Pebble Beach wasn't a problem, but marketing Del Monte, it was all about the history. People had forgotten more history about Del Monte than you want to shake a stick at. So I started researching first to find out who the first golf pro at Pebble Beach was, but then really digging into the history of the Del Monte golf course and how that grew. And so by 94, I actually felt like, okay, we need to write a new book that really tells the history, because all these great stories have been forgotten. And Pebble Beach didn't want to publish a book. We had published a book in 91 called A Paradise Called Pebble Beach. And that was underway when I started working for the company. So that one already had a writer. I edited it. I went back to Golf Digest, who we published it with in Connecticut, and helped with the final edits on that book. But I was still learning a lot about golf. By the time 94 had rolled around, I knew a lot more that had been forgotten. And in 97, I was actually approached by Sleeping Bear Press because they had heard how much research I had done. They said, "You want to write a book? We want to write a book for the 2000 U.S. Open. We want to publish a book on Pebble Beach." So that was my first book. It was called Pebble Beach Golf Links: The Official History. And it really told the story of how Pebble Beach was developed. And because I had the information and it was part of it, I included a lot of the development of the Del Monte golf course, because that was the beginning of it all. Without Del Monte, the old course, we wouldn't have had the new course. When Pebble Beach opened, it was actually considered Del Monte's second golf course, because the resort was Del Monte. So that was my first book, and it was actually awarded the Golf Book of the Year by the International Network of Golf.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
So it was probably had 7 reprints with over 50,000 copies sold. It was
that's fantastic.
A major success.
Yeah. You can still get it now, right?
Well, it's out of print. There are lots of used copies on the market. So you can find used copies of it, and usually Amazon has used copy sellers that have it, or you can go to Book Finder. But it's out there, and they're all coffee table books. This is the first book. Let's see if I can get it.
Nice.
Okay, so Joanne Dose did all of the modern photography, but we had a lot of photographs in it.
Just the photographs alone are out of this world, probably.
Yeah. The odd thing about history, when you're writing history about an entity that is from the past, that's easy. When you're writing about an entity that's still living and thriving, that's where it gets a little bit dicey, because the history keeps moving. So I wrote this in 1999. It was literally with the publisher when the new owners came in 1999. Peter Uberoth and Dick Ferris and Clint Eastwood and Arnold Palmer bought the golf course, actually the whole property, in August of 99. The book was at the publisher, and I couldn't get the new ownership story into the book. I mean, there just wasn't any way to do it. But I got Mr. Uberoth to write the foreword for the book, so we at least got a mention of the ownership change into the first book. But the bigger story there was, because I wrote it in early '99, Tiger Woods hadn't done anything at Pebble Beach, so he's barely mentioned in the book.
Oh,
A year
yeah.
later, he wins the AT&T, he wins the U.S. Open, he's
The
the
U.S.
biggest
Open,
in
yeah.
golf, and he's not in the history of Pebble Beach. And it's like, wait a minute, we've got to update this somehow, but you don't want to do it immediately. So the book continued to sell well for about 5 years, and we finally said, okay, we've got to figure out an update. So I started talking to publishers about how to update it and what to do. And then the company wasn't sure what they wanted to do, so it literally went out of print. And in that time frame, we also acquired literally tens of thousands of negatives, historic images that had walked away from the company with a prior. And we got all those negatives back and started scanning them, and they were fantastic. So the company opened an art gallery that sold some of the modern photography and paintings, as well as the historic photography. And we decided that people were having trouble deciding what picture they wanted. So the company decided to publish a book with 100 classic black and white images.
Oh,
So
nice.
that was the next book, and we called that the Pebble Beach Heritage Collection. The concept was we hired a young writer, a journalism student, to write the book, and I was going to edit it. And the editing became a little heavy, so we're co-authors on that book.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And so that was a one-time printing. We did 5,000 copies of that. It sold for $100, but it's a beautiful
So you
book.
got some classic black and white photos of
Just there are some terrific, and the Heritage Collection is broader than just golf. We've got pictures of 1920s ladies in their finest sitting on bumpers of their cars watching a polo match.
Oh wow, that's got to be great.
There's a picture of dogs sitting at a table with a waiter at the Hotel Del Monte. There's a great picture of Salvador Dali, who called the Monterey Peninsula home for most of the war years. He lived at either Hotel Del Monte or the Lodge. And there's a great picture of him with Dorothy Spreckles Munn. Dorothy was one of the Spreckles family, and Dali actually painted her. The painting he did of Dali, the painting that Dali did of Dorothy Spreckles, hangs in the Legion of Honor up in San Francisco, which the Spreckles family built. And we've got this wonderful picture of Dali with Dorothy. So it's got a lot of great pictures in it.
You just reached out, and just people were just finding different photos.
Well, no, these were all the company had a photographer on staff up until the mid 1980s.
Man, that's unbelievable.
These were, and there was a difference of opinion when we released the last photographer, and he took the negatives with him.
Wow, that's really great.
And he's since died, and we were able to get the negatives back. And just an amazing treasure trove of images from the 1920s up until the 1980s. And it's just terrific.
I've got a lot of those people stayed at the Del Monte Hotel too.
Yeah. There's some great pictures of the old hotel and the guests that were there, the dog shows that were there, the special events, the diving competitions in the Roman plunge. So
the concourse.
The very beginning of the concourse, and all these, the old Pebble Beach road races.
Wow, that had to be really,
that was special. So anyway, and some of the road race pictures are in that Heritage Collection book. Anyway, we got moving on towards the next U.S. Open in 2010, and we decided, okay, we better update the history. So I wrote a new book that was. The first book was Pebble Beach Golf Links, the official history, because it focused on Pebble Beach Golf Links. The next big book was Pebble Beach, the official golf history. So
Okay.
this one has a little bit on all of the golf courses that the company had a hand in, which included the Monterey Peninsula Country Club courses, the Cypress Point course, Poppy Hills, which is owned by the Northern California Golf Association. The company actually built the Pacific Grove Municipal Course as well as of course, the Del Monte Golf Course. So they're all in here, and even the Peter Hay course is mentioned.
That's really, yeah, that's
and then
great. It's really great.
So that book was able to update the ownership change. So that story is now told. And then in the appendix, this book really focused on the tournaments that have been played here. And one of the reasons for all of the courses being mentioned is because many of the tournaments here have used multiple courses. The state amateur began at the Del Monte Golf Course back in 1912 and then added Pebble Beach in 1921 and has used Pebble Beach ever since. But then when the Monterey Peninsula Country Club opened, they used it for qualifying. And when Cypress Point opened, they used it for qualifying. So all of the golf courses have been used in the state amateur over the years. And up until, 20 years ago, they were still using Pebble Beach every year. So that's what this book does. And in the appendix of that book, I documented the results of over 400 championships that have been played. Over 400.
You got the winner, the strokes, and the.
Yeah, for the state amateur championship, I have the winner, runner-up, semifinalists, and medalists, and the scores for every year. For the Crosby AT&T, I put in the top 10 pros and the top 10 teams for every year. For the U.S. Opens, I put in the top 30. There was actually a Pebble Beach Women's Championship back in the 20s up until World War II. So that's all in there. The Trans-Mississippi tournaments that have been here. So it's a pretty complete record of the play. So that was a project. We got that put together.
What a project to get over 400 results. I mean,
yeah.
You must have been pulling your hair out a couple of times.
Well, it's one of those things that as somebody who loves the history, I was always digging into it. So
yeah,
getting the results were sometimes a little bit challenging. One of the interesting things with the state amateur, some years they would have a medalist. And the medalist they have stroke play before they go into match play, and the medalist is the low scorer in the medal play, the stroke play. Some years they would have a playoff if there was a tie, and some years they would have co-medalists. And I was like, okay, how do I know which they do? Well, at the Poppy Hills, which is the headquarters for the Northern California Golf Association, they have the tournaments for the California. They have the big
results
trophies. They have the trophies.
Yeah.
And there's two trophies. One is called the Tufts Trophy, and that's the trophy that the winner of the match play is carved on. He's actually the California championship if they've won the match play. But the medalist is put on the Chandler Egan Trophy. So I went up and went through the names on the trophy so I could, they would have multiple winners if there were co-medalists. Well, one year there were 3 co-medalists.
Oh, wow.
And the names on the trophy are wrong. Well, actually, one of the names on the trophy.
Yeah.
In 1948, it was a great year for the tournament. It came down to the final match was between Mac Hunter and Gene Littler. Gene Littler, of course, went on to become a major professional golfer. So did Mac Hunter become a professional, but he didn't get the name that Littler did. But Mac beat him on the 3rd extra hole. So they played a 36-hole final and then had to continue playing because they were tied.
Wow.
And they were still tied after playing the first hole. They were tied after playing the second hole. On the third hole, Hunter got a birdie and Littler didn't, so the tournament was over. But there's a great picture of the final championship with Mac holding the Tufts Trophy and Littler holding the Egan Trophy, because he was one of the co-medalists, but his name isn't on the Egan Trophy. They put somebody else's name on there because the only thing I can imagine is they must have started carving it before the tournament ended, because it looked like he was going to win the tournament. And then he took a 10 on the 18th hole at Pebble Beach and finished fourth.
The guy said, no problem. Put his name on it. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine. The guy's having a drink and is like, what? So did they change the trophy?
No, the trophy still has his name on it, even though he wasn't really one of the co-medalists.
Wow, that's crazy.
So you never know what you're going to find when you start digging into the trophies.
Now, are you still digging into this? You're not?
Oh, yeah. I never get tired of researching the history. And I actually, now that I'm retired from Pebble Beach Company, I write a weekly history beat column for the Carmel Pinecone. So
good. That's really
I'm writing about a lot of history besides the golf. But
so
tournament week this week, I actually wrote a column on the tournament and how even in the old days, there was a year when the amateurs didn't come. There was a year when they only used 2 courses. There was a year when they had a cut after 36 holes, which they weren't able to do once they started using 3 courses. So everything that was odd about this year had happened before, except this was the only year that there's never been a gallery.
Oh yeah, this is a historical year. So we could see your column on the Pinecone then.
Every week.
Yep, that's good news. That's good news for our listeners out there.
Yeah, there's so much history here. You never run out of topics.
And I'm going to throw another history at you, but not it's not golf. What do you think of this Western Flyer coming back?
I think it's terrific. And when I started learning about local history in '85, my wife and I attended a talk on Steinbeck. It was called A Quest for Genius, and it was a one-man show doing readings from Steinbeck's collected works. And one of the things he read was from Steinbeck's Acts of King Arthur and His Noble Knights. And I'm going, what does Steinbeck have to do with King Arthur? I had no idea the connection.
Yeah.
They announced at the intermission that there was going to be a class on Steinbeck and King Arthur at the community college. So my wife and I actually took the class, and I cut my teeth on local history with Steinbeck. And in '94, I was actually on the board that reinvigorated the Cannery Row Foundation. So I am very fond of all of the effort that's gone into bringing the Western Flyer back. I just think
it was abandoned. It sank a couple times. But what a great thing for you and everybody involved to bring this historical boat back to Monterey where it belongs. This is really great.
Yeah, I can't take a whole lot of credit other than helping to push a few buttons, but there were a lot of people that did a lot of work to make that happen.
Well, when's it supposed to be back, you think?
The things I'm hearing is it may be back maybe later this year. If not this year, definitely next year. I think it'll be floating in the Monterey Harbor.
And they're going to use it as like a museum, floating museum.
Well, it'll be used for a lot of different things, but it'll be used for educational purposes. They'll be having workshops for youth on it to learn about the fishing history as well as I think they're planning to take some cruises down to Sea of Cortez with it. But I met Tony Berry, who was the captain of the Western Flyer when it was being used here on the Monterey Peninsula, and he's the one who captained it down with Steinbeck and Ricketts for the Sea of Cortez trip. And Tony's nephew introduced us. So
Yeah,
and
that's really beautiful. That's the Monterey Bay Aquarium had a exhibit on that. They called it the Sea of Cortez. It was beautiful. It was all colorful fish, and it was amazing. And now recently, I don't want to take much more of your time, but it was because I'm a nut. I'm a history nut. Is there's a boat made by Angelo Sino, who was a big boat builder of Monterey back in the day, and the the family had a boat. Well, he built a boat for somebody. It was called the General Pershing.
Oh,
And that, I guess, the boat just was it the family had it, but it was just kind of sitting out in the nothing really going on. I mean, just kind of wear and tear out there. And from what I heard on an article, I don't know how accurate it is, but the family donated it to the grandsons of the boat builder Sino.
oh, nice.
Yeah, and the two grandsons now, as we speak, are at the dry dock, and they're putting it back together. And they're
great.
saying that they're going to do a floating classroom also on that.
Sure.
So I mean, that's really, it's really amazing that the grandfather, the boat builder, now the grandkids have it, and now they're doing. So it's really great that everything's connected. But
Yeah. The fishing history here is tremendous, and it was one of those love-hate relationships, because it was the economic driver of Monterey for many years. But it drove Sam Morse nuts, because when the canneries were going full tilt, the wind was blowing everything right over to the Hotel Del Monte. So he didn't have a whole lot of qualms about moving everything to Pebble Beach after the war, letting the hotel go.
Yeah.
But now it would be a whole different story, because we don't have that stench anymore from the canneries. But
no, it was a love-hate. It was like I didn't like it because I was a kid growing up. But now that if I had that, it'd be beautiful. Just give it to me. I miss it. But Neal, we're gonna let you go, and we really appreciate you coming on and sharing your fascinating stories with us. And I'd like to thank you for what you do in this community for keeping us abreast on history.
Happy to share. I love history, and I love being able to share it.
And I'm going to be looking for your me along with who's ever on this program. Looking forward to your column over there on the pine cone.
Very good. Well, and all of the back stories, like I say, it's been almost 2 years now, and CarmelPinecone.com, they're all available online in the archive.
I really appreciate it, and if somebody wants to know a little bit more about you, they can go. You got a website or?
I do have a website, and the Pinecone always publishes my email address. So if people have thoughts or questions, I'm very available.
Okay, Neal, I appreciate what you do, and thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, cousin.
I'll get you back on again another down the road. You're back on. You're not off the hook yet. So thank you so much. Take care, Neal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
That was fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and buzzing with Cousin. Thank you, Neal Hotelling, with all those fascinating stories. And I'd like to invite everybody for the next show, going to be March 9th, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. March 9th, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We've got a guest, Mary Lee Sunsuri, musician, songwriter, specializing in children's music. She's great. Been on the peninsula a long time. She's won an awards. So we'll be looking forward to chatting with her. And so if you missed the show, or if your friends missed the show, watch the replay on Buzzing with Cousin. And then there's a Buzzing with Cousin channel on YouTube. Go to that channel, subscribe, and you could tune in to all the old, I'm not saying old, but all the past programs. We thank everybody once again for Buzzing with Cousin. Take care, everybody. Stay safe. And until we see you again, bye.